including the folks at Chicago Kent, in trying to make this as advanced as we could, with the theory being it was easier to retrofit the faculty than to retrofit the building. So we are slowly learning our way through this, and we hope to be able to take advantage of all of these various opportunities as we go forward, but I just want to point out we're still learning our own way. Each of the rooms in the building, as I think you're beginning to see, are fitted out pretty much as this room is fitted out. Each one has a document camera. Professor Franco will illustrate some of its capabilities. It's a digital document camera with very high resolution. Each of the desks has this flat panel monitor with a computer, a Pentium computer in the desk, which allows you to go to the web and to use any computer material you want from the network. We also have this touch panel which controls the media that feeds into the class and is also recording all of what is being said here today and is part of the streaming media that we are sending out. And also, I just want to show you one feature which is somewhat reminiscent of the old James Bond movie, which is that we can close our window shades against the afternoon glare. And I'm going to now turn the program over to my colleague, Professor Joe Franco, and we will run a fairly quick process here, and then I'll come back up to the podium. Joe?
Let's see, we're all set.
We got a couple seats up here.
We're going to double click this.
Got a couple for you.
There we go.
You can always sit in front.
I've been asked to share some of my experience in using the technology here at Suffolk. Yes, it is. And I have to say, I'm probably a fairly logical candidate for this in the sense that I am a very intensive user of the technology in the classroom, and I principally use PowerPoint. In another sense, I may not be the most logical person, and that's because I'm really not a person who is a technophile. I'm not a person who naturally uses computers or at home programming the VCR or anything like that. I use it really because it works for me. It has some value added to the class, and that's the only reason I really like to use it. That really underscores what I think is a central lesson in technology, especially from the faculty side. And that is this, that there's a lot of gadgets here, and there are mechanical issues in using it. But from a faculty member's perspective, I think the big challenge is how am I going to use that in some way that adds to the value of the teaching experience or the learning experience for the students. And that's really what I'm going to run through. For me, I principally use the PowerPoint methodology really to illustrate or supplement the content of my lectures. I use principally 2 or 3 different devices, and I'm going to go through them. One of the big ones is case diagrams. I constantly use case diagrams in my class. This would be a pretty good example.
Good morning, everybody.
I teach a couple of corporate finance and securities regulations, some investment company regulations. This kind of diagram is, if you look at it, has no real legal insight to it. There's no insight that I'm delivering to anyone by sort of showing this diagram. But it does have a benefit. This sort of visual display in the classroom, I think, tends to reinforce the lecture as I go through it. One of the key issues in this particular case is the allocation of the proceeds from the sale of substantially all of the assets between preferred and common. And so one of the key themes in this kind of case is I want to keep emphasizing sort of the tension between the interests of the common and the preferred.
People who are teaching.
I think this kind of diagram has about what I focus on.
So really,
and that benefit
is really a high-level overview. We're going to have demonstrations all day today. We have a set up.
What I mean by class noise is sort of the misperception or the dispersion of understanding
drill down on what we see today, either from the administrative perspective, actually managing the environment,
do a general discussion
faculty members who are
the class.
So I'll be happy to do either or. So today this is not intended to cover it all. Just to give you
This
sort
kind
of
of diagram sort of focuses
from the instructor's viewpoint,
pretty
take a step back. From the blackboard
You get
viewpoint,
rid of sort of wayward questions. People just didn't understand the fact.
I think one of the reasons that Lexis and our
Who's winning?
Am
I winning?
From the blackboard ease of use is paramount to us. We realized very early on that $45 million to build an online used by some.
Oh, I know what to do. Yeah.
Are you still hearing it? No. Good.
Managing this environment.
That once happened in one of my classes. It was sort of a rock song. It was a shake out there. But what I was saying is, actually, it sort of dovetailed with the point. It reduces class noise. What I was trying to do, class noise in the conceptual sense. Students have a lot of varying degrees of understanding, and that sort of interrupts your ability to communicate a message or share your common understanding of the case. I think it helps students frequently they ask a question, it's a little bit out of focus, and you sort of have to bring it back. It's very easy in this kind of a diagram. Somebody says, gee, common and preferred wind up as common shareholders of this Western Union. Who cares? Well, you can sort of walk them through and say, well, gee, it does make a difference in the particular case. I also think it makes students a little bit more willing to ask some questions and take some chances in detailed material. A lot of times they're not sure that they have control of the details. They worry about it. Having this kind of prop up here, I think, alleviates that concern. It makes students willing to participate. This is another type of diagram I frequently use in securities regulation. Simple chronology of the case. Again, no legal insight here, but it really just sort of distills the essence of the case. This is a case about the materiality of preliminary merger negotiations. With, when or why does Basic Industries have to disclose information? At what point in time does it become material? That sort of thing. And this diagram allows students to see very visually what they're discussing in class.
Do you make them available to your students?
I don't. And I have a reason about reasons for that. I really think the basic reason is I think students should, there's nothing here that is a unique insight on my part. Students should be able to do this, and actually in trying to do this in class, I'm actually trying to encourage students outside of class to sort of approach cases by diagramming them. And so I don't think I'm depriving them of anything, but at the same time, I don't care. Frequently, when I go through a diagram, I have talking points behind the diagram. Typically, I would not show this kind of diagram in the class at all. This is a suppressed slide. I use it in my class notes. My class notes are sort of integrated with this sort of presentation. So you get to see this, but I will run through these points. I will allow the class discussion to evolve in whatever way it evolves. But I sort of have a checklist of talking points that I certainly want to cover. The other type of use that I use for diagrams in the PowerPoint context is parsing statutes. This is a very common kind of diagram that you see in the securities fields, really diagramming Section 5 of the 33 Act, sort of lays out the legal requirements. And you can sort of break this down. But what is interesting and what students have trouble sort of grasping initially is there are these different time periods tied to the filing and the effective date of a registration statement. You can use other sorts of devices, which this I call just the basic box diagram. This is something I might hand out and allow students to sort of work through. And what I'm going to do with them during the class, basically, is sort of fill in these items. And in filling in these items, sometimes it's very useful to be able to bounce to sort of statutory provisions. And people who are familiar with the securities law obviously understand in this particular diagram, a key definition happens to be the definition of prospectus. So talking about the waiting period, G, you have to be able to determine whether the sales literature is a prospectus. G, let's look at this definition. The definition also has exceptions, so you can bounce back. And then, you can go backwards and forwards, that sort of thing. Very nice. Practical examples is the third way in which I use PowerPoint. I like to be able to just flash up something. Now, this is a cover of a prospectus, red hat. I could easily sort of take it out in class and sort of, wave it. It's a little bit more effective. People get a feel of sort of, what is a legend, what is this sort of breakdown in terms of how proceeds are going to be allocated. You can dovetail this kind of thing with sort of a practical breakdown of how the proceeds in an offering will be divvied up among the underwriting syndicate and the issuer. Other types of use, sometimes in my corporate finance class, you do very basic, present value problems, obviously very suitable for that. Option, basic diagrams, very easy. The last thing I'm going to use here is actually to show the document here. Any sort of document can be sort of put into PowerPoint just by scanning the document. It has some disadvantages in that I can't really control what we're seeing with the document. And so you might want to compare it to what you could achieve with the document camera. This is very similar. I'm going to show the image again. But, if I really want to get into the sort of the footnotes, these ads, here this kind of ad, does have some legal significance. It's a Rule 482 ad. And so sometimes you do want to just draw students' attention to some of the technical sorts of qualifications that accompany the use of this type of practical example of the rules and regulations relevant to your particular area of the law. Go back to this.
It's where your students
My time
to allow them
is pretty much done.
their grade.
I'm going to just sort of summarize
the tools section,
why I use PowerPoint.
and it would be check grade.
what I think is why it's useful.
Which is also why I want to. The thing that I
First of
want
all,
to stress to you is
my own philosophy is
Keep it very simple. I'm using it in terms of my own teaching style. I principally use it to really illustrate content rather than to outline or summarize the actual text of my lecture, so that some people have a slightly different style, and everyone has to sort of judge what is best and works best for them. Most people probably mix and match. Sometimes I do outline stuff. The PowerPoint methodology, I think it can be a little subject matter sensitive. I think con law, I'm not so sure how well it would work. But I think for actually a very broad part of the curriculum in the law school, this kind of technology or teaching device is very useful and adaptable to a lot of different styles of teaching. In terms of the pros and cons, for me, the bottom line is it's very easy. I'm not a technologist. I'm not very gifted at this type of stuff, but it's very easy to use, very powerful in the classroom. I think the diagrammatic techniques do help students. We talked about this class noise effect of really sort of filtering that noise out and making it a little bit more focused in presentation. Also, I do think it also contributes to really more efficient use of class time. You don't waste time writing things on the board. You have a lot more control. You can vary your speed much more easily. You can stop on something, and you can move very quickly if you want to. The drawbacks with PowerPoint: passivity and crutch effects. Students sort of look up there and they're sort of expect, That's part of the reason that I've sort of stripped out a lot of the content.
What Blackboard is,
I don't like a situation where the students are texting. I depend on some discussion and spontaneity in the class. And for that reason, I sort of adjusted how I use PowerPoint to sort of make it as effective as possible. And that really concludes what I have to say.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Professor Mike Avery, but I would also invite all of you who are standing. There are some seats that you're welcome to filter in, and I guarantee you there's enough room so that if you want to filter out, you can do that too. So. I should point out we will also take questions at the end for all of the presenters.
Well, good morning. I teach evidence and I teach civil rights and individual rights at the law school, and I tend to use the, I suppose, technology more in the evidence class than in the other, but we'll give a little demonstration today of both. If Professor Franco's emphasis could be described on using the technology to explicate difficult points and make it easier for the students to understand complicated financial relationships, what I'm going to show you is maybe a little different idea behind why I use it in my classes. Not that we don't do anything complicated in my classes. From time to time we do. But the idea that I want to show you today is how to make the information more memorable so that the students will actually have something in their mind as well as in their ears, something they've seen with their eyes to carry away from the class, and then also how to convey the emotive force of information to people. So imagine that we were doing a class on leading questions, and we start by giving a simple definition of what a leading question is. There's really no single great definition of what a leading question is, but we convey to the students the idea that it's something that is unreasonably or overly suggestive to the witness of what the answer is we expect. We might put a couple of examples up on the board and then discuss them. The obvious leading question is one that begins, did you not, or ends, as this one does, with did you. But a less obvious kind of leading question is the kind that contrasts two choices, one so vague that no one would choose it, the other one so pointed that the witness understands that's the one they're supposed to choose. This one is suggested by Professor Kirkpatrick from Oregon Law School, who was a distinguished visiting professor here last year. But the other thing we can do is we can embed a video in the PowerPoint presentation. Now, we also have the option here of showing videos directly from the head end. We have video banks in the head end. I can put a tape there and let them know that I want to show it in the classroom, and then switch to a different function off our touch panel here and show it. But this one, Gina Doherty, the head of our computer department here, and she'll kill me for this, but by the way, happy birthday, Gina. This video slide was embedded in the PowerPoint, and then this is from the movie Rainmaker. We're just going to watch a little bit of it here. Oh, wait a minute. They turned off my volume.
Mrs. Marguerite.
What did you... Let's...
We should have it.
Okay.
Probably be blasting them. They're just flying.
Whoops. Okay, here we go. We had to turn off the volume before because of the interference we were getting, but now we should have it.
Mrs. Marguerite Black.
Now, Mrs. Black, you are the mother of Donna Raymond, who recently died of acute myeloid leukemia because of dependent great bacteria.
Now, the nice thing about embedding it in the middle is that you can stop after the question and the objection, and then, I mean, it's obvious what the objection is here, but if it were less, I hope it's obvious, if it were less obvious, you could discuss it with the students, and then you just go on.
Sustained. Your son, non-read, needed an operation. Legally. Sustained. Mrs. Black, you purchased this medical policy because you were concerned about medical care of children.
Now, if we stopped it here, one thing we could do then is have a class discussion about how he could rephrase this question in order to do it properly. Danny Glover, being a nicer judge than most of the ones I've appeared in front of, is going to do that for him here.
Mr. Taylor, why don't you show the policy and ask her why she bought it? Mr. Taylor, you must ask her to approach the witness. Sorry, Commissioner, you may.
Don't you wish you had Danny DeVito there with you when you were really trying cases? Take it easy. And then after that, then we have a discussion about how you really frame questions so that they're not leading. And I usually tell students that the key to that is just to remember what your third grade teacher told you: who, what, when, where, how. Be a little careful with why, particularly if it's a hostile witness. So that is that one, and then I'm going to show you one other to sort of give you a little better idea of the emotive force of information. Both Professor Blum and I do a lot with police misconduct, and we do a lot of continuing legal education seminars. It doesn't like that. There we go. This one is part of one that I've done many times about excessive force. You could also do this in the classroom. The idea here is to give people some idea of what police canines might really be like. A friend of ours who works for the National Jury Project says that it's hard for a plaintiff to win a police misconduct case involving a dog because jurors don't like to vote against the dog. So I said, well, let's introduce them to my dog. Injuries are expected when police use canines, and so it's essential, and serious injuries are expected when police use canines, and so the courts have held that it's necessary in order to use a canine that you first give warning that the dog is about to be released. This case involved a woman who was at home asleep in her bed. Somebody mistakenly reported a breaking and entering in progress. The police released the dog into the home without giving a warning, and the dog attacked the homeowner with this result. Now, I think it's just much more effective to put that language up on the screen the size of the wall in the classroom and let people read it than it is for me to read it aloud. And again, it gives students a little bit of an idea of the emotive force of information. Those of you who are going out to a Mexican restaurant later this evening, you might want to stick with the jalapeno instead of the cayenne after this information about pepper spray, because the cayenne is 300 times hotter, sprayed through a jar like this. And again, we can describe to somebody that after you've been sprayed with oleo resin capsicum, the mucous membranes inflame, you find it hard to speak, your will to resist subsides, or we can show them a picture of a police officer who's been sprayed in a training exercise. So obviously this kind of information is useful for students if you have them in some kind of trial practice class or evidence class, or if you're really trying to get them to understand the nature of information. I've spared you today the section of the class where I talk about whether or not the prejudicial impact of information is outweighed by its probative value, where I show the autopsy photos to the students on the screen. I didn't think you needed to see that, but it's neat in class because even the ones who get totally disgusted by it are having an educational experience, which is really appreciating the force of that information. Thank you very much. Karen?
Again, most of you came in late. There's still a few seats. You're welcome to come and sit down. Also, welcome. Mr. Blum is coming up. I should just point out that it is not the convention to overlay all of these technologies in one class hour. Doing the best we can to give you a taste of different things.
I just saw something great.
Thank you.
I would love for my students to have access to it, but I really want them to do it within the conceptual framework of this course. I don't want someone to go home and go to AV.gov or report.gov.
The fact that I'm on this program is sort of living testimony that anybody, believe me, can do this as long as you have good tech people behind you. One of the things I do in addition to the PowerPoint and use of the other technology in the classrooms, videos and so on, is I try to bring in guest speakers and do it through the teleconferencing device that we have. The room I usually use is room 365, which has Gather, and believe me, I know not of what I speak, but it has different camera setups, and so that on the what's called the far end, I keep referring to it as the far side, you know, that the cartoons. On the far end, if I'm using 365, my understanding is that they then can see the individual students, and each desk, each seat has buttons where the students, if they press a button, they get to ask a question, and the camera then will automatically focus on them or that student, and the viewer on the far side will be able to see the student who's asking the question. I've used this teleconferencing device in both my police misconduct class and my federal courts class. I've had, I'm good friends with Erwin Chemerinsky, and he's a very nice guy who always says yes, so I've had him speak about the Rampart scandal report that he wrote for the police misconduct class, and then in my federal courts class, he did a class on the Garrett case, the ADA case, the issues of federalism and so on, and the students really love it. Today, we're fortunate enough to have with us a colleague of both Michael and myself, David Rudofsky, who's in Pennsylvania. David is an old friend and is one of the leading civil rights lawyers in Pennsylvania. He's a senior fellow at University of Pennsylvania, teaching there and practicing law, and waiting patiently for us. David, can you hear me all right?
I can't, Karen. Good morning.
Okay. And David has an anniversary as well. It's his 30th anniversary of his law firm this week, right? Practicing law in the civil rights area. And what we decided is we'd do just a little back and forth on a case that most of you have probably heard of, the thermal imaging case that was decided by the Supreme Court on June 11th, where the court discussed the question and decided the question of whether using thermal imaging device to detect heat coming out of this house, indicating the growth of marijuana, whether that was in fact a search. And David's going to speak to us a little bit about that case, and then you can ask questions when he's finished telling us a little bit about the case. David? And thank you for being so patient, David.
I hope you can see me okay here. I can see you well. The Franco case was a particularly significant case decided by the Supreme Court this 2 weeks ago concerning the Fourth Amendment. Many of you are aware that the court for the past 30 years has struggled, some say not so well, with the question of what actually constitutes a search when the police are trying to discover evidence. What crosses the line between unobjectionable activity and something that actually constitutes a search. And the court has said that the dividing line is one's reasonable expectation of privacy. The famous Cass case in 1967 was a case where they said using electronic surveillance in a phone booth, many students don't remember what a phone booth is anymore, is a search under the Fourth Amendment because one has an expectation of privacy about that conversation. Used to be to put a dime on the phone, and an expectation of privacy. Since that time, however, the court has decided a number of cases in which they've cut back on the right of privacy. Trash that you put out in front of your house to be picked up is not accorded any privacy. If you're in your backyard, you may have fenced it off the neighborhood and may be involved in intimate activity there isn't entitled to privacy because the theory is somebody in a plane overhead could see it. And if you expose it to the plane, you expose it to other people. Bank records are not going to afford privacy. And so the court really has cut back significantly on that right. CALI may pretend some change. And particularly, it's interesting in light of this conference with technology, CALI was a case that's concerned with new technology. It was police use of a thermal imaging device, as you mentioned, Karen, which measures infrared radiation that was coming from the house to determine whether there were high points of heat within the house. And the government argued in the lower court that there was no search here because one had no expectation of privacy with respect to the heat loss from the house. The Supreme Court disagreed, and it's surprising from two respects. One, the split of the court is very interesting. Justice Scalia wrote the majority opinion. Justice Thomas was in the majority. And Justice Stevens, normally thought of as the most liberal member of the court, wrote the dissent, saying there had been no search and no violation of any expectation of privacy. I think what may be the turning point here, in terms of the court's thinking, is their concern about new technology and the way technology can invade privacy. Interestingly, all 9 members of the court decided that what they call through-the-wall technology would be violative of the Fourth Amendment, X-rays or other devices that could actually show what was going on in the house. What was the issue here is what the dissent called off-the-wall technology. What's going on in the house, but they demonstrate what's going on. And the court said, even though this is the off-the-wall technology, and only by inference can you then determine what's going on in the house, that's still a search and has to be justified by some probable cause or reasonable suspicion, depending on what the standard is. The court emphasized that they were dealing with a house, which is entitled to the highest degree of privacy, and didn't want to draw lines between the kind of activity that might be demonstrated by this new technology. So I think a very important decision. We'll see many more in the coming years as the court struggles with this issue.
Thank you, David. I'm going to, just to demonstrate the technology a little bit, have somebody, if anybody has a question in the audience, otherwise we do have a plant. On the merits or on the technology, I don't know. Don't call. Oh, Michael, do you have a question?
Well, let's see if someone in the back row doesn't...
Ask him anything, you know, what the weather is like in Pennsylvania today. Just, yes, sir.
I'll ask him.
Hi.
How do you compare this case? Was it Dow Chemical, an earlier case? Photographic magnification was okay, and this is not. I forgot the right case. There was a case, several years back where the court said was concerned to some extent about high power camera magnification, and said it didn't concern them too much. How would you compare this case to that case?
I didn't quite. I'm getting a lot of static here.
Yeah.
I didn't get that question. I'm sorry.
The question was, how would you compare the CALI case with the cases was decided a few years ago about magnification of, I guess it was photographic images.
It was a chemical plant. Was it Dow?
Chemical plant, Dow Chemical Plant, was it? Yeah.
The Dow case, 2 points. One, what the court says is, in that case, you were dealing with commercial enterprises and industry, and the homes entitled to a much higher degree of privacy. I'm not convinced necessarily that distinction. And indeed, to some extent, to the degree the court has, the court being consistent here, the dissent may have a better point here, given their prior cases. And it's hard for me to believe that most people would think, on a reasonable expectation of privacy, that what you do in your backyard is intimate fashion. What you put out in your trash, which might be very intimate, your bank records are entitled to less privacy than the heat that's leaving or the sound that may be leaving your home. I think you've got a situation, this is a 5-4 decision, where the court has been inconsistent for many years, and I don't think we can look forward to any consistency in the future. So what the court said is the distinction in that case is we're dealing with a commercial enterprise, here you're dealing with a home.
Right. I think our time's about up. David, we really appreciate your standing by there and giving us the time. I assume this was pro bono, right? Okay. Thank you very much. If I could just add, interestingly, footnote 3 in the case does make a reference, Scalia cites, to the website for the internet website of the National Law Enforcement and Corrections Technology Center for all of the new sort of projects and devices that are coming out to get through your walls or off your walls or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. One of the things that I want to point out, we are having tours of this building, and at the conclusion of this session, you're welcome to wander down. Again, I want to point out for some latecomers, several of the people here who are instrumental in making all of this technology work. Jim Barrett, our webmaster, Ms. Wilkie, who's the head of the University Media Services, George Camo here, who's basically in charge of the law school part of this operation, as well as the, I always get his title. I don't know what I do. And Associate Dean John Aliso, and also Gina Doherty, Director of Computer Services. I want to point out one other thing. At 12:30, we've got 2 demonstrations scheduled available to you. The distance learning classroom, which does have all of the facilities that Karen referred to. There are 3 broadcast-grade cameras. This camera here is a very simple fixed focus, fixed position camera that can move in and out a little bit, but it's far less sophisticated than the cameras in 365 next door, as well as the sound system, which enables each student to be heard. The camera's automatically fitted to that point, and we also have the ability in the classroom for the teacher to decide which student gets to speak. So it's not just that you want to speak and you automatically get to speak. The instructor has the control over that as well. Are we still on picture? Okay. All right. Let me take some questions. We're waiting for the picture tail to disappear so I can show you one other thing upstairs. Yes, sir.
You are certainly here at Suffolk on the cusp of using this new technology in the most effective way. I think for many of us in the room, the question is, what comes first? Do you build the technology, and if you build the technology, the faculty will develop the skills necessary to use it effectively and make use of the capital investment, or do you wait for the faculty to come and develop, impress you with the need for the technology? I'd like to know from each of you or collectively, how did you get started using this, and how can I convince my faculty that they ought to get started using it, or should I tell my faculty to not use it because it's going to cost us a hell of a lot of money? What comes first?
Well, we made the decision because we were building a brand new building. We used to be in a smaller facility that some of you have experienced over on the other side of Beacon Hill. And in the process of doing the design work here, we went around the country and looked at all the various schools. And indeed, the classroom you see is modeled actually on the Harvard Business School rather than any law school we saw, because we wanted the students to see each other. I mean, there are little pieces of technology built in here, like slots for name cards, the elevation, the floor plates are actually greater on the 2 classroom floors so we can have the elevation. We made a decision to build the technology first and have the faculty follow on. Now, there were faculty who were early adopters even in the old building, and we had the opportunity to test some of this in that building. But in the process of doing this, we made a commitment and said, look, what's the state of the art? And we hope that our faculty will begin to think of ways to use it that we can't even foresee. So we decided to build it first and hope they will come, sort of like Field of Dreams. Mitch?
One of the things I would add to that is that the law school administration and certainly our board of trustees made a commitment to outfit the entire school. And as we went through the budget process, people said, well, what if you have some rooms with technology and some not? And what we agreed in the legal technology community, working with media services and the computer folks, if it's only in 2 or 3 rooms, and you're developing curriculum material, you have maybe a 50-50 chance, a 70-30 chance. How often are you going to get that room? Why should you do it? So we said we would rather have less technology in every room and build over time so that people know what they're getting. the administration came back and said, okay, do it all. And I think that's part of what helped. And the other thing we did was to really create classrooms. You've seen a lot of juggling around, which Professor Baker referred to because we're really layering a lot of different things this morning. But we tried to put the technology together so that the faculty did not have to be technologists. And I think if you walk up and play with the touch panel a little bit afterwards and talk to the faculty, you'll see that what they were doing in their presentations was really teaching, not implementing technology. And I think that's part of how we helped make that really accessible so that we got more of a buy-in.
Did you convert a classroom in your former building before moving here?
We did not.
You didn't have
We had one room where we sort of tested some.
Right, but not like this.
Yes.
Not a fully...
Just for those of you who are on the streaming media, Ms. Wilkie had just responded that we had tried to build out everything so everybody would have an equal opportunity, and the administration said do it right and do it thoroughly. I should acknowledge, by the way, in the back of the room, Professor Ron Stout from Chicago Kent, who's a pioneer in this area, and we acknowledge our debt to him and his colleagues. Let me just show you one brief bit of another facility. This is this is room 555, which is part of the library. In the process of building the building, we wanted to do simulations, and the problem was we wanted simulation rooms, and they needed to be small, and we had need for a classroom. And to the great credit of our librarian, Betsy McKenzie, she acquiesced in converting part of the library space, so we now have a library seminar room, which you see here. And the interesting thing about this room is there's a touch panel there, but it also controls access to the screens in the other room. And we've got somebody up there. Can you try? Thank you. Can you try and just show one of the seminar rooms? This is just a feed, and just show one other if you would. This is all done with the touch panel. Takes a second to move over. But we have basically 5 of those rooms.
The lights are off.
Oh, the lights are off. Well,
Usually the students put the lights
yeah.
on.
Thank you. And what we have tried to do with all of this is to enable, in that room, for example, I teach a mediation seminar, and it enables me to run simulations, take the students while they're in the simulation, show selected segments from the simulations in the classroom in which we are conducting the seminar. So it's a facility any of you do simulation teaching you want to take a look at, and I'll show that if anyone would like to see it between 12:30 and 1:30, again at 555. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Throughout the course of the various presentations, they've all been interrupted for one reason or another. How do you sell those interruptions as the cost of doing business to faculty who are not engaged in technology?
With some difficulty. Now, I should point out that no system is bug free. But one of the buttons on the touch panel is called Media Services.
How many people are there?
We have somebody on duty all the time. And the telephone is here that connects to Media Services as well. So we do have some backup. And I should let my colleagues who use this technology. Karen, you want to say a word?
Yeah, I'll just say, I am, in response to your question, I'm someone who probably would not be doing this unless it were here. And the fact that we had all this, I felt compelled to use some of it and learn how to use some of it. And the other, the students are they're excited about this too, and they're into this with you. And so don't forget, what we're doing in this room today is, everything, so that we're probably the systems are overloaded. We're switching from a lot of things to one thing to another, which it can handle, but there are going to be some snags. If I run into something in my classroom, which generally if I'm just doing PowerPoint or video, I don't. I think there may be one instance, once during the year when I had to, I tell the student, pick up the phone, call 911, and within 30 seconds, usually somebody's in the classroom and they figure it out. And for me, it's usually something that, someone else could have figured out on their own, but it's usually, you didn't press this button or that button or whatever.
Well, also I think maybe just a It isn't. A plain, candid answer to your question is, on a good day with humor, on a bad day with irritation. I mean, it happens, and it's like a lot of different things that can go wrong. Speaker doesn't show up or something, or shows up late, or what have you. But you have to have a backup plan so that you have something that you can use if what you're planning on using here doesn't work.
Just to add one thing there, I use it for every class. Failure rate is very low, but relative to the earlier question about, can you sort of do this on an ad hoc basis, I was actually one of the persons who was identified in the old building to sort of begin testing various things out. And I'll tell you, the failure rate there was much higher, and it was far more frustrating. You have to have a system that is just built seamlessly to work. And so it makes a big difference being in this building right now. There's just no problem. And the gain in terms of what I can do in the class far exceeds the minor once a year sort of inconvenience.
What percentage of your faculty uses the technology?
What percentage of the faculty? George, what?
Actually, more than 60%. We have 60 full-time faculty members and 120 adjuncts. Adjuncts are very heavy users, but even our most senior faculty members are extremely heavy users once they get integrated into the technology. You have to come to terms with the technology by virtue of the fact that even the light switches are on the touch panels. And generally, there's sort of mission creep at that point. What else can I do?
George's response is just that we do have about 60% of the faculty in some level of it. I think that's up significantly from last year. But of course, one of the challenges is to make it as easy as possible for everyone to use. Gentleman in the back, yes, sir.
You have power outlets and network connections on each desk. Obviously, power outlets are great for laptops, network connections. Do you actually use laptops on the network for classroom purposes? And also, do you have problems or are faculty members afraid of students browsing the web while they're in class? And how do you deal with that?
I'll let Professor Blum answer that. Just point out, again, the question was, what about the use of laptops in the classroom, and what about students using their own laptops in the classroom to watch other things than what they're supposed to watch?
Well, I think as there is in every other law school, there's a definite split on the use of the internet or having students plug in during class. And Michael and I, who agree on a lot of things, on most things, disagree on this. I did ask this year, second semester, I said, unless we are going on to the internet for some reason, I'd prefer you not to have your internet connection plugged in. And the reason I said is because I found in observing other classes, when you're observing other teachers, non-tenured or whatever, that to me it was extremely distracting to have somebody doing their email or eBay or whatever they're doing, who's 2 rows in front of you or over to the right of you. I found it to be kind of rude and distracting. So that was and most of the students, in fact, I had a couple of first-year students who came up to me and said, thank you for announcing that policy. Now, some students may disagree with it, I'm sure they do, but they know, at least in my class, that I prefer that they not be hooked up unless we're doing something. The one time we did do something, and this shows you how little I know about the technology. I made, I guess what was the mistake, I don't know. I said, okay, now we're all going to go on Twen, and I want you to see this. And so I had, all 100 and whatever they were, so let's all go on together. So of course it took, I said, why is it taking so long? We usually just get on with it. So the students, of course, started laughing. I said, oh, okay, I think I'm beginning to understand the problem. So we didn't do that again, everybody signing on or whatever at the same time. But, I think you do what's comfortable for you. And there are some classes in which, if they're doing statutory kind of stuff, they may go on the internet or, going on Lisle or Lexis or whatever.
On this, as with many things, as Karen said, there's a disagreement. Also, the question that came before about, do you put the slides, do you make the slides available to students? Joe Franco does not. I usually do make the slides available to students because it's my observation that as soon as you put anything up there that remotely resembles a list, the students feel they have to copy it down, right? And so the first time that happens, I tell them, don't copy it. It'll be on the Twin site later. And you can have it, you don't have to copy it. I'd rather have you looking at me, listening to me, looking at that, being live here in the moment, and we'll give you the information for free later in the same list format. But that's just a difference of opinion, and maybe has something to do with your style in the room in general or something.
I should mention on the laptops, we do have a standard that the students need to meet if they want to have a laptop and plug into our network. But we don't require them. We facilitate them acquiring network laptops, and that gives us a little bit more flexibility about shaping what they do with them in the classroom, because we're not forcing them to have one, but if they want one, we want to make sure it works. Yes, sir.
How do the students use this technology?
How much do the
student presentations or stuff in class?
I can just comment on my class. In my mediation seminar, students make a presentation of a formal paper, and I've been astonished. 2/3 of them have come out and done a PowerPoint presentation to me and their colleagues. And they're far more facile with it than I am.
Let me add to that, too. I teach a class on expert and scientific evidence, and it's there's no paper, there's no exam, but there's a project. And the project is graded, and part of the grade in the project is how well you use demonstrative aids that are available in the classroom. So for that class, they have to bring in an expert, and they have to make some slides or show a movie or do something. And they have no trouble with that. I mean, they come in and practice, and then they do it for the thing, and I think they have a lot of fun with it.
Is the same support available to the students as available to the faculty?
I think it is, yeah.
The question, just for, again, the webcast, was how much do students use this, and the answer is more than we thought, and we have support for them just as well as for the faculty. Yes?
I'm curious about the whiteboards. I'm wondering if there's conventional chalkboards behind the whiteboards, and also whether they're smart boards, or whether you decided that chalk and technology are incompatible.
These are whiteboard. The question was, do we have real chalk behind the whiteboard, and are there smart boards somewhere? Short answer is these are dumb whiteboards. They just are as good as the people who wield the markers. The chalk technology apparently produces dust, which is incompatible with the electronics. So we went to a whiteboard technology. We do not yet have smartboard technology, although we've been looking at it. And I had in there as a demonstration in several of the sessions of some of that technology here. Yes, sir.
Do you offer training to the faculty, and how do you get them to go to training?
We offer training to the faculty, and how do we get them to go to the training? The short answer is we offer training to the faculty. How we get them to go to the training is really a more challenging exercise. And it usually happens as someone sees someone else. One of the things we've done as part of our faculty meetings, we've had a couple of demonstrations of this technology. One for the full-time faculty, where we had several of our colleagues do something like we did today. So that they could see that some of their peers were doing this. And second, we've done the same for our adjunct faculty, which is rather substantial in this school, just so that they could see it. And, it's a case where there is I can't remember if Ron coined this term, but in the computer world you referred, or someone referred to the valley of despair. And that is that it takes a while, you have to go into the valley to climb out the other side while you learn the technology. We hope we've made the valley of despair somewhat more shallow, the trip up the other side a little less arduous, but it does take some time, and I think it's a gradual process of seeing colleagues adopt this, having a particular need which the technology may assist.
Well, one of the comments I would make on the training, though, is it's not group training, it's one-on-one. And I think once you become an adult, you really don't want to sit in a room with 10 of your colleagues and be the dopey one. So people come to us, they come to Gina. We've done some group sessions on PowerPoint, which is a little different, but if you want to learn to use a room, or you want to learn something very specific to how you're teaching, there's somebody on either side of the house or on both sides of the house will take as much time to make sure you're comfortable.
It's also train until trained.
I should indicate our staff makes house calls.
Right, absolutely.
How does staff work? The students, what are the students' reactions to technology? Do they feel they're learning better?
Let me just ask the staff to tell how many people are in the staff. Do you know how many?
Four computer services.
Four computer services, George?
There's 3 immediate services, but where we have more that we bring in from across the university. For CALI, for this particular event, there's approximately 19 support people that have come together across the university to support this 500-plus person conference. It's pretty extensive.
And Jim, how about the rest?
It's basically me, and I have 2 staff people like
I also think both Gina's staff and our staff is here from the beginning of the day till 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
The answer was that we're here from basically 9 to 9. Comments from colleagues about how students react to this?
I asked the students on the evaluations to make a comment on, because I was using this and trying it when we moved into the new building for the first time, their reaction to PowerPoint, whether they liked it, didn't like it, too much, too little, suggestions or whatever. I found that and I'm not sure what it was, but the first year I did it with my civil procedure class, and civil procedure then was a 1-semester course. And it was just overload. And I think that the students found, and I totally agreed with them, I was using too much. I was putting too much on the PowerPoint. I considerably reduced that this past year, leaving, much more to discussion and comments, and just putting major concepts kind of on the PowerPoint. In terms of, in my upper class students, both my civil rights and my federal courts and my police misconduct classes liked the PowerPoint. And what I did, I used different approaches. I did not give the slides out to the first year students. I did give them out in advance to my federal courts class. And I found that in the federal courts class, I used the PowerPoint slides mostly to raise issues that we were going to talk about, raise questions, this is so that they had some focus for their reading for the class. So when they came to class and I put the PowerPoint up, it was usually what was on the PowerPoint were questions or issues, and they knew that that was coming. So I think that was probably helpful. I still don't know, to be honest with you, which is better, giving them out, not giving them out. I haven't quite figured that out. The students always want them. If you ask the students, they want the slides. I'm not sure it's always the best way, but it seemed to work pretty well in the federal courts class, so I may try that in civil procedure as well.
I think our time is about up. Let me just thank you all for coming. The members of the staff and the faculty who are here, as well as other colleagues, are available to you for further questions. There's a tour of media services at what, 3:30? Anytime after 12:30?
And the distance learning room is open at 12:30.
The distance learning begins at 12:30 to 1:30, 555, the simulation center from 12:30 to 1:30. And please make yourselves at home. We'll also be around, a number of us at the reception this evening. Thank you all for coming.